It started as a joke, or rather he thought it was one. The rooftop of Valemont Tower buzzed with champagne laughter, billion-dollar secrets and the clinking of glasses held by people who hadn't worried about rent in decades. A string quartet played in the background, barely audible over the hum of ego and ambition. In the corner, unnoticed by most, Lena Monroe wiped down a silver tray. Her uniform was crisp, her expression unreadable. She'd worked these events before. She knew how to be invisible or how to pretend she didn't hear what was said about people like her. But tonight, she was tired. Not from the hours, but from the smugness, from the entitled air thickening every time a man in a tailored suit made a joke he thought clever. Especially Cassian Vale, CEO of Valemont & Co. 33, Harvard, cufflinks worth more than Lena's annual rent. And tonight, in his navy tux, whiskey in hand, he was holding court as usual. "You see," Cassian drawled, gesturing toward the enormous chessboard set up as decor, "chess is the last true meritocracy. No luck, no excuses. You either know what you're doing, or you get crushed." A few executives laughed, too loud, too eager. Lena kept wiping. "Even love," he continued, "should be earned like chess, calculated, strategic." He raised his glass. "Beat me, and I'll marry you." The crowd laughed. "You serious?" One of the interns smirked. "Dead serious," Cassian said, turning toward the chessboard. "Any takers?" Silence, smiles, shrugs, until Lena stepped forward. She wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the way he hadn't looked at her once all night. Maybe it was the way everyone looked at her like she was furniture with a name tag. Or maybe she was just done being silent. "I'll play you," she said. Heads turned. Cassian blinked. "Sorry, what?" "I'll play you," Lena repeated, setting the tray down, "unless you're afraid of losing to the help." The laughter died fast. Cassian stared, then smiled. The kind of men wear when they think they've already won. "All right, then," he said, sliding off his jacket. "Let's make this fun." The board was already set. Cassian took white. Lena didn't flinch. He opened with E4. She responded instantly. C5. Cassian raised a brow. "Sicilian defense. You've been reading." "I've been winning," Lena replied. One move. Then two. Then checkmate. 3 moves. Cassian froze, his queen dangling, his king cornered. Silence stretched across the rooftop. Lena stood slowly, smoothed her apron, and leaned in just enough to whisper, "Marry me or not, but the next time you joke about merit, make sure you know what it looks like." She turned and walked away, heels clicking louder than applause. And for the first time in years, Cassian Vale didn't have a word to say. The story hit the Valemont office Slack before Lena even made it home. Someone beat Cass at chess last night, in 3 moves. The maid? They can't be real. Do we even know her name? They didn't, but they would. Lena Monroe stepped into her tiny one-bedroom in the Bronx as dawn broke. The city was groggy, half awake, and so was she. Her shoes hit the corner, apron tossed on the hook. She didn't check her phone. She didn't need to. Her mind was still back on that rooftop. On the moment his eyes flickered, not with embarrassment but disbelief, as if he couldn't imagine someone like her seeing more than mops and mop buckets, as if intellect had a dress code and she'd shown up without an invitation. But she didn't regret it. Not the challenge, not the win, not even the whisper. Next time you joke about merit, make sure you know what it looks like. It had been simmering in her for years. The job interviews where her voice changed, the professors who called her gifted like it was a miracle, the smiles that wilted when they saw her name on paper. She'd grown up with a chessboard in one hand and a cleaning rag in the other, raised by a grandfather who believed strategy wasn't just for games, it was how you survived. Meanwhile, at Valemont Tower,
Cassian Vale sat behind a frosted glass wall, staring at the surveillance clip replaying on loop. The sound was muted, but he didn't need audio. Her moves were surgical, unshaken. Her eyes never left the board. He knew what three-move mates looked like, but no one, not even he, expected to be the one on the losing side of one. "Sir," said his assistant, quietly stepping into the room, "HR is asking, well, a few departments are asking, who she is. Her name's Lena Monroe. She's a cleaner." "Do you want us to—" "No," he interrupted. "Don't touch it. Not yet." Not until he figured out why a woman who scrubbed floors knew more about the game than he did, and why days later he still couldn't stop thinking about her voice, her poise, or the way she didn't even wait for applause. Lena's phone buzzed. Unknown number. A message. "You humiliated a CEO. Do you play tournaments? nychessopen@gmail.com." She stared at it, then laughed. Out loud. Once. "Let them find out who I am the hard way." Because chess wasn't the only game she knew how to play. And they'd just met their queen.
It was supposed to be forgotten. A drunken dare at a corporate gala. The kind of thing that lived and died with the last flute of champagne. But this one wouldn't die. By Monday, the clip had hit the internet. Not the whole game. Just a few seconds. Lena Monroe making her third move, and Cassian Vale leaning back in stunned silence. She mated him in 3. She wasn't even nervous. Did he really say he'd marry her if she won? The post was titled, "CEO Gets Checkmated by a Maid." It had over 600,000 views by noon. Cassian sat in his glass office like a man at war with his own reputation. He didn't like being mocked. He especially didn't like being beaten. The company board hadn't said anything out loud, not yet, but he knew how these things worked. They didn't care about the chessboard. They cared about optics. A maid. A black woman. A quote that sounded like a proposal or a power move, depending on the headlines. And none of them made him look good. It was a joke, he'd insisted to PR. So was Twitter, and look how that turned out. Meanwhile, Lena had gone back to work. The corporate cleaning agency she worked for, SteriClean Solutions, hadn't officially addressed the incident, but Lena noticed the difference. The manager who used to ignore her now said good morning with forced politeness. 3 different executives had stopped her in the hall and asked, awkwardly, "So, how long have you been playing? Do you give lessons?" That was something. She wasn't sure if they respected her or feared her. She wasn't sure which felt worse. 2 days later, a courier delivered a black envelope to her apartment. Handwritten, no return address. Inside, a single card. "Let's finish the game. You pick the terms. Cassian Vale." She stared at the card for a long time. It wasn't that she hadn't expected a reaction. It was the tone that caught her off guard. Not arrogant, not sarcastic, but deliberate. Almost curious. Zoe, her best friend and roommate, peeked over her shoulder. "Tell me that's not from the jackass in the tux?" "It is." "Girl, this is either a lawsuit or a love story. There's no in-between." "What if it's both?" Zoe blinked, then grinned. "Then you better set the board right." That night, Lena sent a reply. Not by courier, but by public post. Just an Instagram story with a photo of a chessboard mid-game, captioned, "Rematch? Try thinking more than 3 moves ahead this time." It went viral in 6 hours. And now, Everyone was watching. Again. Only this time, Lena wasn't the unknown. She was the queen with a name. And Cassian? He was still playing catch-up.
The lobby of Valemont Tower wasn't used to chaos. It was a place of glass, marble, and practiced silence, where even the espresso machines whispered and heels clicked with authority. But the morning after Lena's post, chaos showed up anyway. A small crowd had gathered outside the revolving doors: journalists, TikTokers, vloggers, and even a few college chess club members holding handwritten signs like "Rematch the Queen," "Power moves, power suits," and "Where's the ring, Cassian?" It would have been funny if it weren't so public. Cassian Vale stood by the 42nd floor window, watching the mess from above. He didn't laugh. Not because he was embarrassed, but because for the first time in his career, someone had turned the narrative on him, without even stepping into a boardroom. "You should let this die," said Olivia Tran, his chief of strategy. "You've got quarterly reports, an acquisition pending, and now PR has to babysit chess drama." Cassian turned from the window. "You're right, but she's not a distraction. She's a challenge. She's a cleaner. She's a genius." Olivia folded her arms. "And what? You're impressed?" "No," he said, adjusting his cuffs. "I'm intrigued." Across the city, Lena met with a lawyer. Not because she wanted to sue, but because when a billionaire starts sending notes and social media buzzes with your name, you protect yourself. "You didn't sign a contract," the lawyer said, flipping through a printed screenshot of the gala video. "It was a joke. He never meant it." "Doesn't matter. The world heard him offer marriage, and then you won. So now it's public, and the public loves a bet with stakes." Lena bent back in her chair. "I don't want his money or his ring." "What do you want?" Lena thought for a moment. "A table." "A what?" "A table at which people like him make decisions that affect people like me." The lawyer smiled. "Then don't play checkers when they've already set up chess." That night, Lena posted a follow-up. A white screen, black text. "I'll play again. One match, live, public. If I win, you fund 3 scholarships in my name for girls in underfunded schools. If you win, well, you won't. Your move, Vale." The internet exploded. Even mainstream outlets picked it up. CNBC. CEO turned challenger, the chess match that won't die. BBC. From cleaner to contender, Lena Monroe sets terms in viral rematch. BuzzFeed. She beat him once, now she's raising the stakes. In a late-night board meeting, one board member said, "You could ignore it, let it fade." Cassian replied calmly, "No, we play on her terms." "Why?" "Because this time, the board matters more than the company." Back in her apartment, Zoe looked over Lena's shoulder as she read Cassian's public reply. "Accepted. Let's make it a real match. 7 p.m., live-streamed, next Friday. And if somehow I win, I get to ask for a second date." Zoe gasped. "That's smug, smooth." Lena just smiled. "Then I guess I'd better bring my A game." Because this wasn't just a rematch, it was a negotiation. And Lena Monroe had just rewritten the terms of engagement.
The press called it the match of the year. Social media called it hashtag Queen vs CEO, hashtag Rematch Friday, and hashtag 3 Moves Revenge. Lena called it just another game, but this time the entire world would be watching. It was hosted at the Metropolitan Club, Cassian's idea. Grand chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows, a live orchestra warming up softly in the background. The event wasn't televised, but it might as well have been. The live stream had 1.2 million people waiting before the first move. Lena entered in a fitted navy blue dress, elegant but functional. Her hair was pulled back, lips matte, face calm, and utterly unreadable. She looked like she didn't come to play. Cassian stood across the room in a black suit, hands in his pockets, trying not to look impressed. "No uniform tonight?" he said as she approached the board. "Didn't want to embarrass you twice in the same apron," she replied. He smiled, not smug, not mocking, just intrigued. A hush fell as they sat. The chessboard was perfectly lit, captured from above. Every piece gleamed under the spotlights. "White or black?" he asked. "Ladies first," she said, already moving her pawn to e4. "Aggressive," he noted. "Strategic," she corrected. They traded moves quickly, the kind of speed that only comes from people who think 10 steps ahead while talking calmly about nothing. Their banter masked the war beneath their fingertips. "Tell me something," Lena said between moves. "Did you really mean it? That night? The bet? The marriage?" Cassian looked up, not defensive, not arrogant. "At the time? No. Now?" He moved his bishop. "I'm not so sure." Lena didn't blink. "You should be. Why? You planning to win again?" She looked at the board. 1 move ahead. 2. "I'm planning for check." 20 minutes in, the chat on the live stream was pure chaos. She's playing like it's personal. Did she just sacrifice her knight? This is a trap. I can feel it. Cassian leaned back, watching her from across the table. "You're different from what I expected." "You expected a maid." "I expected someone who'd settle for winning once." "You expected wrong," Lena said, sliding her queen across the board. "Check." Gasps in the room. The live stream viewer count ticked past 2 million. Cassian glanced at the board. He could block it. He could stall. But he knew what was coming. Still, he played on 3 moves longer, delaying the inevitable. When the final move came, Lena didn't gloat. She simply tapped the king and whispered, "Mate." The room burst into quiet applause. No screaming, no confetti, just acknowledgement, the kind of win that doesn't need celebration to be real. Cassian stood and offered his hand. "You win." Lena shook it. Again. He said, "Fair terms. 3 scholarships, your name, wherever you choose." She said, "Harlem, Chicago, New Orleans." He said, "Done." He turned to leave, then paused. "And the second date?" She arched an eyebrow. "You just lost again." He said, smiling, "Exactly. I figured you might like that." Backstage, as the cameras were taken down and reporters hovered like bees, Zoe caught Lena in a hug. "You wrecked him again." "Queen behavior." She said, "I didn't want to wreck him." She didn't? "I wanted him to see who he was playing with." Across the room, Cassian watched her from the shadows. He lost again. And yet, for the first time in a long time, he didn't mind at all. Lena Monroe didn't sleep that night, not because of nerves, not from excitement, but because the inbox that used to hold overdue bills and agency shift schedules now overflowed with invitations, interviews, and offers. TEDx, the New York Times,
A scholarship board that had previously ghosted her now asked if she'd like to collaborate on a visibility campaign for underrepresented talent in strategic thinking. The irony made her laugh, a short, quiet thing in the dark. Across town, Cassian Vale sat alone in his penthouse kitchen with a glass of scotch and the chessboard from the event. The pieces were frozen in the final position, his king trapped, her queen standing over it like a crown in motion. He didn't hate the loss. He hated that he wanted another game. Not out of ego, out of curiosity. Because Lena Monroe wasn't just brilliant. She wasn't playing by his rules. And somehow, that made him want to learn hers. The next morning, Lena stood in front of PS 181, an underfunded public school in Harlem. She wasn't there for a photo op, no press, no makeup team. Just her, a school principal, and a check signed by Valemont & Co. 3 scholarships, full ride. Her name printed at the top, the Lena Monroe Initiative. The principal beamed. We've had chess clubs before, but this is going to give girls something bigger. It's not about chess, Lena replied. It's about reminding them that they can win, even if no one sees them coming. Meanwhile, a board meeting began without its CEO. Is he late? One director asked. No, another replied. He stepped down this morning. Murmurs rippled through the room. He said it's time to explore other games, Olivia Tran added, barely suppressing a smile. That afternoon, Lena found a small white envelope slipped under her door. No name, just a black pawn stamped on the seal. Inside, a single invitation. Your game, your rules. No audience, no stakes. Just truth. She didn't respond immediately. She sat with it, studied it, until Zoe walked in and raised an eyebrow. So, you gonna go school him again? Lena shrugged. This time, I think I just want to see what happens after the game.
The apartment was not what Lena expected. For a man once hailed as one of the most powerful CEOs under 35, Cassian Vale's post-Valemont life looked surprisingly minimal. No glass walls, no art curated by European dealers, just a one-bedroom walk-up in the village with old wood floors, soft jazz playing from a speaker, and a bookshelf stacked with poetry, philosophy, and chess theory, all dog-eared. She stood just inside the door, arms folded. So, she said, is this the part where you offer wine and try to impress me with Camus quotes? Cassian looked up from the table where the chessboard was already set. No wine and no Camus. Just a board and a question, which is, what happens when there's no bet, no company watching, no audience waiting for the punchline? Just 2 people, playing. Lena stepped forward slowly, her heels echoing across the quiet floor. Then you're finally playing my kind of game. They sat. No timer, no commentary, no tension. Cassian made the first move, e4 again. Lena smirked. Didn't learn the first time? Maybe I just like routines. Or maybe, she said, mirroring with c5, you like getting beat. They played in silence for a while, the pieces moving fluidly, naturally. Each move carried less of a threat and more of a rhythm, like a conversation, not a confrontation. Cassian leaned back eventually, watching her rather than the board. You know, he said, before all this, I thought control was everything. Build the brand, predict the outcome, win. Sounds exhausting, Lena murmured, capturing his bishop. It was. I didn't even realize how much until you showed up with that apron, looked me in the eye, and didn't flinch. Lena tilted her head. You used me as a punchline. I know, he said. I've regretted it since the second move. Good, she said, moving her rook, because I've been planning this comeback all night. He laughed softly, not the smug chuckle she remembered from the gala, but something lighter. The game stretched on, longer than any they'd played before. Not because one of them couldn't win,
but because somehow winning no longer seemed like the point. After almost an hour, Lena stared at the board. Her queen had a path. Cassian noticed. He didn't move to block. "You can win," he said gently. "I always can." "Then why haven't you?" She looked up. "Because I want to know what it feels like to end a game without having to prove something." Cassian leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "So what now?" Lena said, "We leave it. Unfinished. Like possibility." He rose with her. The board sat silently between them. "You ever want to finish it?" he asked. "Maybe," she said, heading for the door, "but only if you bring your A game next time." "And if I do?" She turned, smiled. "Then I might stay for more than just the board." Outside, the city hummed with summer energy, and for the first time in years, Lena Monroe wasn't playing defense. She was just walking home, with the board still open and the game finally hers to choose.
Cassian Vale had never been in a library without someone offering him a private room, a curated archive, or a list of books pre-selected by an assistant. Until today, he sat at a shared wooden table in the Brooklyn Public Library, scanning dusty file boxes and microfiche like a grad student chasing a thesis. Only this thesis had a name: Lena Monroe. Not because he was stalking her, because he was starting to realize how little he knew about the woman who would become his greatest loss, greatest teacher, and possibly more. He typed quietly, "Lena Monroe plus chess tournament NYC. Lena Monroe plus Harlem Academy. L. Monroe plus Bronx STEM Initiative." The results trickled in, thin but clear. Local newspaper clippings, a middle school chess trophy at a neighborhood community center, a scholarship she'd turned down because the travel stipend didn't cover rent. "She's been winning," Cassian muttered, "just off the scoreboard." Meanwhile, Zoe sat across town staring at a closed office door in Midtown. She'd just finished her 4th meeting that week with a corporate diversity board, all of them asking the same thing. "Would you consider a consulting position? Your story is so inspiring. We'd love to align with that. Have you ever thought of a book deal?" She wanted to scream. Not because the offers weren't flattering, they were, but because every closed-door conversation came with an open file in someone's hand, a profile printed from a Google search, her gala video paused mid-sentence, and the same line over and over: "The maid who beat the CEO." As if that was all she was. As if her life didn't start until the moment he lost. Zoe met her at a cafe later that day, iced chai in hand. "You look like someone tried to pitch you a TED Talk again." "They did," Lena sighed. "You say yes?" "No. I told them I'd rather coach girls who already know how to win. They just need a seat." Zoe leaned back. "So what do you want, Lena? For real?" Lena paused. She wasn't used to being asked that. Not since her mom died. Not since her grandfather, the man who taught her how to think 3 moves ahead, passed quietly in his sleep. She exhaled. "I want to build something," she said, "that isn't about proving myself, that just is." That night, her phone buzzed. "Cassian, I found your community tournament records. Impressive." Lena, "I found your Forbes profile. Condescending." Cassian, "Fair." A pause. Then another message. "Cassian, I have a key to a place with no cameras, no boardroom, no audience, just chairs, quiet, and a clock. You game?" Lena, "You bring in the board?" Cassian, "Always. Because some doors open with key cards and titles, and some open only when you stop trying to be impressive and start being real." The room was nothing special. A basement rec center near Prospect Park. Cheap folding chairs, humming lights, and mismatched clocks ticking out of sync. The air smelled like old linoleum and yesterday's lunch. But to Lena, it felt like home. Cassian was already there when she arrived. Sleeves rolled, no jacket, the board set between them.
"This where you learn to play?" he asked. She nodded, taking her seat. "This is where I learned to win." They played quietly for a few minutes. No audience, no stakes. Just two people trading moves like lines of poetry. Cassian glanced up mid-game. "You ever notice how the endgame always feels lonelier?" Lena raised an eyebrow. "Because fewer pieces are left?" "Because the patterns get clearer. But you also realize no one's coming to save you. It's just you, the board, and the truth." Lena moved her bishop with surgical precision. "I never expected anyone to save me." "Same," he said. "That's the problem with people like us," Lena said. "We're so used to surviving, we forget how to let someone stand beside us." Cassian didn't speak right away, but when he did, his voice was low, honest. "What if I'm trying to learn?" "Then stop playing like every move needs to win." They finished the game without a victor. Draw by repetition. Mutual, respectful stalemate. And Lena, for once, didn't mind. Because sometimes not losing was the first step to something better. Later, over takeout and warm beer, Cassian asked, "What would you do if you weren't the maid who beat the CEO?" "I'd start a foundation. Not for charity, for strategy. Teach girls how to play the game before they even sit at the table." "You want a partner?" She tilted her head. "In chess or in business?" "Both," he said. No smirk, no charm, just clarity. "Then prove you're not playing for a win." She didn't answer right away, but when she reached across the table, not for the board, but for his hand, it said everything. The game was still in play, but the pattern had changed.
The foundation launched on a gray Monday morning. No fanfare, no red ribbon. Just a group of young girls filing into a rec center classroom with mismatched chairs and hand-me-down chessboards. The plaque outside read, "The Monroe Initiative for Strategic Minds." Cassian stood by the door, holding a box of donated timers, his jacket off, sleeves rolled again, the way Lena liked him best. "This wasn't how I imagined my post-CEO life," he said. "You imagined a yacht," Lena teased, "and a tailored book deal." "I imagined being admired," he admitted. "Now I'd rather be useful." Lena smiled. "That's your first real win." Inside, the girls paired up and started playing. Some knew the moves, most didn't, but they leaned over the boards with a kind of raw confidence that didn't ask for permission. Across the room, one girl, maybe 12, raised her hand. "Miss Monroe, do you ever get scared of losing?" She paused, kneeling beside her. "Every time I sit down at the board." "But you still win?" "Sometimes. But even when I don't, I learn. That's the real prize." The girl nodded thoughtfully. Lena squeezed her shoulder before moving on. Later that evening, Lena and Cassian sat outside on the center's back steps, watching the city lights flicker on like slow applause. "Do you miss the boardroom?" Lena asked. "Sometimes. I miss being certain." "Certainty is overrated." "I used to think winning meant control. Now I think it just means clarity, knowing what you stand for and why." He looked at her, his expression unguarded. "So what do you stand for, Lena?" She didn't flinch. For the girl who doesn't wait for permission. For the move no one sees coming. And for the queen who knows the game isn't over just because the king fell. He exhaled. "You're still thinking 10 moves ahead." "No," Lena said, leaning against his shoulder. "Just far enough to see what kind of future we can build." They sat like that for a long time,
No timer, no pressure, no pieces between them. Just a quiet city, a new chapter, and a game that would never quite end. Because the board had changed. And this time, she wrote the rules.